Greetings and welcome back to Lantern Bridge. Fresh from magical adventures in Greece, my guest today is author, musician, filmmaker, and spiritual teacher, Nikolas Schreck. Nikolas has spent decades inside and later exposing the most controversial corners of the occult, including the notorious Church of Satan, led by his former father-in-law, Anton LaVey. In this interview, we'll dig into the bizarre and dangerous relationship between LaVey and Michael Aquino, founder of the Temple of Set, and strip away the myth to reveal the real Anton LaVey. Was he a master sorcerer, a winking P.T. Barnum-style con man, or something far darker and more pathetic? Before we begin, please cross the bridge and subscribe and light your lantern with a like. Your support greatly helps bring conversations like this to the table. Nikolas, welcome back.
Thank you very much for inviting me again. Our last conversation seemed to have stirred a lot of positive feedback, even from people who you might think would be adverse to acknowledging the deficiencies of the occult world. So I'm happy to be back to try to clarify any other of the many misunderstandings that cloud clarity and understanding about this topic.
Well, thank you again. Now, last time we spoke, right away, you sort of offhandedly just mentioned in passing that LaVey had sort of wanted Aquino to be killed, literally, and being the great interviewer that I am, I never followed back up on that. So this is a chance
Right.
I'd like to just start with their sort of bookending or connecting these interviews. What was that about?
Well, to put that in context, Aquino, I think I have to describe the almost homophiliac love that Aquino had for Anton, his almost limerence level obsession with him, which in itself was pathological. It was much more than admiration for someone whose philosophy he agreed with. It was a deeply personal obsession, I have to say, and so to put that in context a little bit so you understand the drama and tension of it getting to the point where Anton wanted to kill his main admirer. Aquino met Anton, or saw him fleetingly for the first time in 1968 at the premiere of Rosemary's Baby in San Francisco. And that was the sole connection that Anton LaVey had to the 1968 film by Roman Polanski, Rosemary's Baby. The theater hired him. This was a typical 60s PR move. Because Anton had this local notoriety of having a Church of Satan, which was considered kind of a zany counterculture thing, to promote the film, he arrived in a hearse to the San Francisco premiere of Rosemary's Baby. Now, for people who may not know, that was the only connection he ever had to the film. He was not the technical advisor. He was not in it. And if you want me to, I can give you all the evidence that Zeena and I discovered spontaneously that was simply one of his many lies, let's face it. And so Michael was, in Vietnam. I think he had just gotten out of his service in Vietnam. I might be a little foggy on his military career there, but he had just been in Vietnam in combat, and he came back to San Francisco, which was his native city, and he saw Anton, and the only way you can describe it is he fell in love with him. He fell in love with his smile. He described it to me, and he describes it in his hagiography hatchet job combination book, The Church of Satan, which shows you it's the book of a spurned lover. It's I loved him and I hated him, and it's like listening to anybody going on and on about their narcissistic ex who they broke up with. That was the tone. And so he had, it was more than a philosophical agreement. It was a personal obsession with the person of Anton LaVey, not just his ideas. And then, as some of your viewers may know, he sort of Anton was tremendously lazy and didn't want to have anything to do with the administration, or he wasn't even interested in having an organization. And by the time I met him, I should clarify, it was not an organization. It was a depressed agoraphobic sitting in his house like the Wizard of Oz, pretending there was something, and not even with any great effort, kind of halfway pretending, like a broken down carnival ride that doesn't have any customers anymore. So now Aquino was very ambitious. He was like this eternally adolescent workaholic Boy Scout who was ready to be, yes, sir, what can I do for the Church of Satan? And so and he was basically an administrator in the army. He was not a psyop spook. He was not a MK Ultra mastermind. He was a paper pusher who was in an office dealing with logistics, financing, and all the, just people need to understand that when I say these names, people get a totally wrong, exaggerated idea. So he put to use his army administrative training to try to turn the chaotic and unorganized Church of Satan of 1968 or 69 into some kind of viable organization, which it was not. And he loved the Boy Scouts. Michael talked about the Boy Scouts all the time. That was his occult, organizational influence. So he tried to turn the Church of Satan into a very organized, administrative, functional thing. And then we'll get into the schism later, but there was, for those who may not know the sordid story, there was a huge schism in 1975 when Michael decided that, which is ridiculous because it was always corrupt, that Anton LaVey was corrupt and the Church of Satan was a vehicle for his personal ego, and that he was giving away these grandiose titles to people for payment or favoritism, which I add as a footnote is exactly what Aquino did in the Temple of Set immediately, but
really?
hypocrisy. Yeah, we'll get into that. The very thing that Aquino pretended was the reason he quit and formed the Temple of Set was the same thing he did, rewarding people with these meaningless titles for ass licking and favoritism and, political favor and that kind of thing that happens in office politics or in the army, particularly. I mean, Aquino did take the corruption of the United States Army promotion system. So he said he was offended by all that. And we'll get into the schism and the reasons for it more a bit later. So by the time I met Anton in 1988, he hated Aquino with a passion that was also pathological. I mean, he'd bring it up constantly, and Lilith Aquino, who was a former satanic witch in Anton's, who was the head of the New Jersey branch of the Church of Satan, the Lilith Grotto, which was one of the bigger 60s and 70s grottos in the East Coast. So he hated them. I mean, you'd go visit him and he would bring it up obsessively. Him, Aquino, Lilith, and his ex-common law wife, not really his wife, Diane Hegarty, he wanted them dead. I mean, he talked about it openly all the time. And one particular night, I mean, and he talked, the limited degree that Anton said that he did magic was we would go into his kitchen, me and my girlfriend at the time, and Anton would play these keyboards, synthesizers that he had set up in his kitchen, which, as I'll explain later, that was our main link as our friendship was as musicians, as keyboard players, as people who liked the organ and the keyboard. That was really one of our main interests. We were not on the same wavelength spiritually, nor did he care if I was, we were interested in music and we played music. And so his idea of magic was playing songs that had hidden messages of murder and death for Diane Hegarty, his former partner, who was in the process of suing him for palimony, and Michael Aquino, who, you know, he never forgave for starting the Temple of Set. So he talked about it all the time. Now, when I got to know Aquino, Aquino didn't even care about that. He was so deeply in love with Anton. It was really like someone who's been in a relationship with the most toxic narcissist, and so says, "Well, I want to see the nice side of them." You know, Anton just, you know, that was probably hyperbole and rhetoric. So it's a very sick
It's these two
psychological.
opposites of, pure hatred and sort of almost you're suggesting a homoerotic type
Right. And
love.
I don't mean to imply a sexually when I say homoerotic. I mean, you know, without sexuality, because
Right.
I think I may have mentioned this when idiots accuse Aquino, who was a horrible person in his own right, of child molestation and all of that nonsense.
Right.
That would imply that Michael Aquino would have sex with somebody. That didn't happen. He was an asexual being, as far as I
Oh,
could tell.
really?
He was like a stunted boy. He was boyish, you know, he
Hmm.
was like not a full adult. So I don't mean to imply that there was any romantic or sexual thing,
No,
but
no.
his love for him, you know, was like that. So and Anton despised him and hated him. So to give you one specific incident, once I introduced Robert Hike, who was he was a fairly notorious local neo-Nazi in San Francisco, and he wanted to meet Anton and his girlfriend, the late musician Wendy Van Dusen. She died recently, kind of known in the industrial world. They wanted to meet Anton. So, and Anton wanted security, you know, like he wanted to play tough guy, like he needed bodyguards. So he said, "Yeah, bring him over, and maybe he can be the Church of Satan security echelon or that." You know, these kind of delusions that he had. And so I brought them over. Immediately, Anton is asking him, "Could you go over to Aquino's? Could you get some thugs together? Could you get people together to harm him?" That was the first thing he
First
said.
meeting.
And first meeting in a few minutes. "Hi, how are you? And could you get together some skinheads?" And these were brutal skinheads who were going out and beating people. He knew that. And also, for those of you who think Anton was some politically correct, woke apostle of LBGT rights and all the bullshit that you may think, he was not. He was not. And so he had no problem with that as long as the thuggery is doing on his behalf. I witnessed, you know, I heard him describe in the most hateful ways how he wanted his ex-partner Diane and Michael killed or dead. He wanted to, you know, he tried to use black magic to kill them, but here he was asking a known, you know, violent, brutal skinhead leader in San Francisco, could you know, they were talking about it. It actually would have been bordering on a felony, this conversation. Here's where he lives. Did you know? Here's his address. He lives out, you know, in that district, and this is where he lives. And nothing ever came of it, as far as I know. But just if people think that the satanic world is one, I see people today, younger people, think, well, there was Dr. LaVey and Dr. Aquino, and they had their differences. No, these were sociopathically disturbed people, one in love with the other, and the other who wanted to kill I mean, that's the human psychological level of it.
Well, and he's teaching and presenting himself as this master sorcerer, but it's basically just him playing in his kitchen on a synthesizer.
Well, yeah, that's a topic we could get into a bit. When I first met him, he would say to my girlfriend at the time and I, who had moved to San Francisco recently, you know, "I'll show you the secrets of magic," and that kind of thing. But he didn't do magic in any way that anyone who is a magician would understand it. He literally only played old songs that he thought would conjure up a mood, and his theory was that because very few people were playing these obscure songs from, say, the 30s or 40s,
Hmm.
that they had some kind of occult power. Honestly, these ideas had less to do with magical principles as we understand them and bordering on paranoid schizoaffective thought. Yes, you can certainly use music as magic, and I do. I mean, in my own music, I've used the phrase sonic magic,
Yes.
but just playing I mean, like, I'll give you an example. He played, I forget what song, and he hated Diane Hegarty. That was the maiden name of the former high priestess, Zeena's mother, who had the very acrimonious breakup, and then she was suing him. He played a particular song, and there was a mass shooter named Huberty, and he went into a fast food restaurant, I think a McDonald's,
Hmm.
and shot a bunch of people. Anton, in his mental illness, believed, oh, that's an omen of, because Huberty is like Hegarty, that somehow his magic was working. And innocent people were shot by some idiot psychopath. He approved of that and thought, well, this is similar. I'm sure people know the myth that he spread, that he had something to do with the death of Jane Mansfield,
Right.
who he also hardly knew. This was a woman, a desperate woman in the end of her career, who was doing Italian porn movies and on her last ropes, and she took some PR photos with him and visited him a few times, and he turned that into, a huge legend. But so this kind of is important for people to understand. He was not a master sorcerer. It's like he claimed that on the day she died, he was cutting out a newspaper clipping of her to put in his scrapbook, and that he cut her head out of something, and then she had this accident. Now, there was a rumor that she was decapitated. Actually, she wasn't. Her wig
Mm.
fell off, and people who saw the crime scene
Uh,
saw her wig laying there and thought her neck was nearly severed in this car accident.
hmm.
Now, if he's a master sorcerer, why would he want to kill his friend by cutting the picture out? It
The
was
target
very
was
confusing.
was the other guy who touched LaVey's
Sam, yeah,
skull or something.
correct, correct. Sam, yeah, I'll explain that. Sam Brody was her new partner, and he was a lawyer. When they had come over to Anton's house, he had touched a skull or some magical bric-a-brac on Anton's altar, and he told him not to. According to him, I don't know what
Mhm.
happened, but according to Anton, you got to take that with a grain of salt every
Right.
time. But so then he said, then I put a curse on him. But if he's a master sorcerer, why Brody's? Why did Jane Mansfield, his friend, die? So
Hmm.
that kind of thing. It didn't make much sense. And the more I got to know him, the more there was a kind of incoherent, schizoaffective thinking, magical thinking as it is described in the psychological textbooks, not magic as one understands it in an esoteric or metaphysical sense. Also, I don't know of any magic he ever told me about that wasn't, I want to kill someone. That's it. I mean, yeah, he was a black magician, so that's fine. But is that the only thing you would use magic for?
Hmm.
So, I mean, I've used it when I was a black magician. I certainly did use, you know, malefica, as they say, to harm and to kill. But that's all he wanted to do, and it was not for any ideological reason. It was just out of petty
Quite
personal
petty.
reason.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I hope that helps
Yeah.
you understand a little bit
Well,
about that.
what about some people who would say, well, his great magic is, people still believe a lot of this BS that he spread. His books are still published, and there's still a Church of Satan in pop culture. So, in a sense, he was a great magician. He's
Um,
famous.
yeah, he became a celebrity, yes, but Well, I mean, people who are drawn to the Church of Satan, I mean, maybe there are some exceptions. I haven't met them, and I've met many of them. Um, are they serious about magic? Are they serious about understanding what the metaphysical truth or spiritual reality is? They're not. They're
Mm.
like many people who are obsessed with Aleister Crowley. They're intrigued by the myth and personality of this colorful persona, which has very little to do with the actual sordid and shabby reality of the person. So yeah, the I have seen, as some of his lies are so threadbare that even the most devoted Church of Satan people have to admit, okay, yes, he lied about that, even
Right.
though they have delighted in saying, no, Zeena and Nikolas just say that because they're jealous of Anton. No, he's a fucking liar, and he lied about everything, like Baron Munchausen for no reason. He was a habitual, pathological liar who would say things for no benefit that were just not true. So yeah, so yes, he created this thing that has a life of its own. And Christian evangelicals and conspiracy theorists have blown the Church of Satan into this huge Illuminati like secret society of power that it never, ever, ever remotely was. I mean, there are people who think I'm still a member and I'm still hiding it. The intricacies and Baroque insanity of these people. Like I'm saying that it was less powerful than it was to protect the secrets of the Illuminati. And I do have to say, you at this point we live in an age of such conspiracy theory madness and alternative facts. I'm not saying these things because I expect to convince anyone, because we are in a dark age now where people will believe what emotionally moves them. And in the same way that people who are Scientologists believe anything you say about L. Ron Hubbard is a lie spread by, suppressive persons, there are people that think, well, anything you say about Anton is motivated by personal jealousy or some other factor. And then Christians believe if we downplay his power, the strength of the Church of Satan, that we're working for Satan. So I accept you can't win. We are beyond a
Mm.
world. It's like Trump. You could say anything to MAGA supporters about Trump, and they'll say fake news. That's what
Well,
CNN
even
says.
from the last interview, people were commenting about how you're lying. Aquino is really, all that is a cover, and and there was just nothing you can do for these people, no matter
No.
what.
So I am in the Spenglerian point of understanding if there's a handful of people out there who are capable of critical thinking and doing research and thinking in a historical sense and not just believing whatever meme or YouTube video that comes up about this topic. But we have gone, and in a way this is the legacy of Anton. He was in many ways a predecessor of many of the worst things about our era. He wanted to create an artificial environment because he was a pathetic, frightened person who didn't want to get out into the world and deal with the challenges of the real world. He was not a heroic person who goes out and conquers. He was a weak person who wanted to stay in his little, like a turtle or a crab in his little privately created shell, and create a pleasant fantasy. And that's the world of AI that people are living in.
Hmm.
He couldn't deal with a real woman. He couldn't have a loving and sexual relationship with a woman because he was a violent misogynist and a narcissist. So he wanted to have artificial human companions. He built these mannequins that
Yep.
he had sexual feelings for. To me, this is mental illness. It's not
Hmm.
but this is the world we're living in many ways. So a lot of his most horrific quirks have become, a lot of people do live in a little bubble of their own AI fantasy, um, There are men who go to get sex robots and would rather have artificial human companion than a real woman. So,
That's
in a
true.
terrible way. And I would say Trumpism too, just bluster and vulgarity and tell the biggest lie you can, and who cares if it's true or not. He reminds me very much of Trump, you know.
The definitely the whole carnival aspect of, getting the big crowds and all of that, with the outrageous persona. Um,
Well, that there's nothing wrong with having an outrageous persona, but just the sheer mendacity of it. In the same way, I don't know, why Trump followers don't have the dignity to say, well, if this guy's lying to me, I don't want to support him. But they are so committed to his personality, they're in denial about it, and that's the way LaVey supporters strike me. Or, and I've seen it with both of them. I think there's a parallel to be made. His lies have been exposed so much. A lot of them say, well, wasn't he a genius at lying? Wasn't it incredible how he tricked people? He was a trickster, like he meant to be the world's greatest liar, as if that was something admirable. I'm sure you've seen a bit of that, like, oh, well, that's admirable. How incredible that he fooled all
right.
these people. And it's like people thinking that every moronic, incoherent thing that Donald Trump does is he's playing 4D chess. He's a genius. This is a kind of denial that people in the People's Temple had about Jim Jones. Yeah, he seems a little unstable, but he knows what he's doing. It'll work out.
Well,
So
just to understand the hatred of Aquino a little bit better, because LaVey played it off as if, oh, just a couple priests left. We didn't want him anyway. But the way you're describing it, um, it was so intense that this hatred lasted the rest of his life. Why? Like, did Aquino really mess up the Church of Satan?
yes, yeah, well, narcissists can't forgive any kind of disagreement or what they see as betrayal. That they then have, and this is the only way to look at Anton. It's just sheer dark triad toxic narcissism. He is a textbook case. There's nothing more mysterious about it than that. If you've ever had the misfortune of being in a relationship with a narcissist, you recognize it. When somebody doubts their complete authority, when someone dares to doubt their authenticity, they have what is called a narcissistic collapse. So when Michael broke with the Church of Satan and claimed to have this contrived vision that Set came and spoke to him and said, you've inherited the infernal flame from Anton LaVey, and it's no longer the Church of Satan, it is now the Temple of Set. And a lot of the most important people in the Church of Satan left with Michael. They did, and not all by any means. Some people didn't like Michael, as in all these occult organizations. There's always feuding and cabals and cliquishness of different groups. Some people were glad to see him go, but he was editing the newsletter. He was doing all the dirty work for Anton, along with Diane. He made the Church of Satan a functional entity because he used his army bureaucratic administrative skills to be a secretary. So he made the newsletter somewhat more competent and professional. He wrote tons of material. He would represent Anton in interviews, and he helped to make it a bit more of a structured organization, which it wasn't. So when he left, there was nothing. There were, and a lot of the people who left were the main supporters of Anton. And then, according to what Diane and Zeena told me, and other people who were around, Anton then in 1975 went into a major depression. He became apathetic. He became even more agoraphobic than he was. Like he didn't like to leave his house ever. He never wanted to, and I'll get into that a bit. Um, his fans might think this was an adventurous person who boldly took on any challenge. He just did not. He was like he lived in a cluttered house that looked like if you went outside of the few areas that were open for public
Hmm.
observation, like a cat lady with tons of hoarding of everything in every room, stuff left over for decades. And he just lived like I always thought of him like a crab or something in the center of this lost world, disconnected from the rest of the world. So he became even more listless. He lost enthusiasm for the Church of Satan. He had a major breakdown and became very depressed. But that's what, if you're a serious leader of a spiritual organization, nothing is going to dissuade you. Um, every world religion has had its challenges. If you're a warrior, if you're a leader, nothing stops you. But narcissists are very vulnerable, actually. And so if you hit them where it hurts and doubting them, they fall apart. And so he had a long period, really until the Satanic Panic started and gave him negative attention again. The Church of Satan declined and with him and became almost non-existent. If it wasn't for the books that came out that started the Satanic Panic, that blamed the Church of Satan, this idea they had of it rather than the real thing, um, for this wave of Satanism that was imaginary, and that brought him negative attention in the 80s again.
Hmm.
But and then he responded to it feebly. He still didn't go out there and deal with it. Zeena basically volunteered, this is serious. We have to deal with this. We're being accused of murder and child abuse and worse. So we have to, and she went out there and dealt with it with very little support from him. He immediately, like typical narcissist, became jealous that she then garnered a following, and he started to see her as a dangerous competition to her. So he had this period where he just retreated into himself after the Church of Satan and Temple of Set schism.
I would like to sort of experience, like when you first met him, uh, what was your I don't know, what was the scene like? What was your impressions? Were you disappointed? Were you trying to become a priest in the Church of Satan, or was this just to help? Or yeah, what was the situation like and your impressions
Uh,
of him?
yeah, so as far as my first meeting with Anton, this gives me an opportunity to clarify many other totally wrong misunderstandings about why I even knew him, how we got to know each other. In 1987, I was working on a book called The Demonic Revolution. Basically, it would have been an overview of all the various occult organizations in the world at that time, to try to, because the Satanic Panic was reaching a crest, and I wanted to have a objective, and realistic historical chronicle of all of these groups. So went all over the world, to London, to Germany. I interviewed the Odinists in England, Asatru groups, Chelemic groups, Kenneth Grant, the Typhonian OTO, who I had some association with before from London in the early 80s. The other OTO, I got into the competition between them. Um, all of the various and other satanic groups and other occult groups. This was how I got to know Richard Ramirez, because I contacted him to do a chapter. Well, yes, there is some satanic crime. It isn't like there was none, but I wanted to clarify what that
Hmm.
was. So I wanted to be objective. So I spent about a year contacting and interviewing every occult leader. I wrote to Aquino at that time. He didn't answer, probably because he didn't like my reputation at the time, though he then became my biggest ass kisser when we became his friend. But I would have met Aquino then, but he didn't answer. I did interview Stephen Flowers of the Rune Guild, and you name it. Zeena even talked to Robert de Grimston of the Process Church of
Hmm.
the Final Judgment. Almost nobody ever spoke to him.
Hmm.
So Anton would have been one chapter in this book. And I wrote the chapter based on the research I did. I have to make it clear, I was never impressed with the Church of Satan or Anton. When I was a child and teenage Satanist, I looked at the Satanic Bible in a bookstore, an occult bookstore when I was a child. When it came out, I remember skimmed through it and thought, well, this is just atheism. This is
Mm.
anti-Christian atheism. There's nothing really about the devil, which is what I was interested in, rightly or wrongly. When I was in the midst of the occult revival in the 60s and 70s, I was interested in the devil himself as a existent being, not some symbolic archetype. And so I dismissed him as most people did who were serious
I
esotericists.
want to just interject one thing here. I had interviewed Mitch Horowitz. He's an occult historian. And
Yeah.
it wasn't about you, but I'm just saying in general, he's like, I'm tired of people pissing on the shoulders of Anton LaVey or, that they're building, people have been influenced by LaVey and others like that. But like you were not influenced by him. I think in an interview you said something of you were using the Bible as a way to summon Satan, which is such an outrageous.
The real Bible, yes.
Yeah. The whole, yeah, the Judeo-Christian Bible.
Right.
So you're not coming from like uh you're not trying to take down a hero of yours or something, like you've got something on a
No,
chip on your
not not
shoulder. I just want to be
not at
clear.
all. I can't say I hated him or anything. I just thought I saw him as a goofy showman like Alex Sanders or uh, Raymond Buckland or all of these figures of the 60s occult revival who were, exploiting the sudden interest in occultism of that period. I didn't dislike him and I didn't like him. I just thought, but it's not for me. It was just atheism
Hmm.
and showmanship. I mean, I remember, see, another thing, I never had to rebel against anything. I think it's important to understand. A lot of people who became interested in the Church of Satan or Satanism, my parents hated organized religion. My father was the kind of person who, if there was a priest or an imam or a rabbi came to the school, he would protest, he would argue with them, he would tell the teachers there's supposed to be strict separation of church and state. He hated and would mock, he would openly mock any kind of organized religion. He was a spiritual person, he was esoteric and interested in philosophy, but he hated the organized Abrahamic religions with a passion. And uh, if a teacher was trying to impose Baptist values, which would happen in America, he would go in and I was openly satanic as a child in school, to the point where in high school, at University High, which was one of the high schools I went to in California, uh, this was a strange experience, but I think it will help you understand where I'm coming from, which is a different place than many
Yeah.
people drawn to this. Um, I was in the detention room for some disobedient action I had done, or maybe I had played hooky or something like that. So you just had to sit in this room and be bored to death. And the teacher took a liking to me because we talked about history or English literature or whatever. And she was a former screenwriter for TV shows, and then she'd become a teacher. So I knew some of the TV shows she did. So we're bored sitting there. Then after this detention class, one day she said, "Can I talk to you privately?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Are you a Satanist?" And I was 15, and I said yes, because I didn't hide it at all at that point. Um, and I thought I was going to be scolded from some religious point of view. On the contrary, she said, "Look, you have to be much more discreet. They'll kill you if you keep acting like this." And she was a Satanist too. And by that I mean a genuine devil worshiper, not an atheistic Satanist. And she like gave me almost motherly advice, like, look, you're way too flamboyant and over the top. If you keep
Whoa.
acting like that, you're gonna get yourself in trouble, which you can see I sure didn't listen to that advice. But so that, or I'll give you another example. So I wasn't rebelling like
Right.
against Christianity or like trying to prove something to someone. I genuinely had a devotion to what I believed at that time wrongly was the devil, and everything to do with Faust and the whole Germanic tradition of the Faustian Mephistophelian tradition, and the I followed the grimoires by the book. Or I'll give another incident. When I was much younger, we had a Baptist friend, a friend of mine, and he was being baptized in one of these Pentecostal type churches. And when we went to be polite, and the priest said to my friend before he was dunked into the water, into this like aquarium, wearing a white robe, he said, "Do you renounce Satan and all his works?" And afterwards, my friend came up to me and said, "I'm sorry, I had to say that. They force you to say it." That's how serious I was, and how open I was about it. So just so you understand, that was my. And now in that same year, '87, I had a friend, Forrest J. Ackerman, who I think I mentioned a little bit in the last interview, I believe. He was the editor of Famous Monsters of Filmland, which was a
Mm.
horror movie magazine that was very popular in the monster mania of the 60s and 70s. And he had known Anton since the 50s, even long before the Church of Satan.
Oh.
He just knew him as a geeky guy who liked horror movies. Like those are the people he knew. It was a very small group of people at that time. And he'd known him for years. And he was having a 70th birthday party at the Biltmore Hotel in LA, this big gala affair. And he happened to mention, "Oh, I invited Anton to that." And I said, "Oh, well, I want to interview him for my book. Can you tell him I'll be at this party? Could I have an hour maybe to talk to him privately?" And he, I guess, spoke to him on the phone, and he agreed. But then, and this is typical, Anton never went anywhere. So he didn't end up going to this party. That was in 1987. I just wanted to interview him for the book about a few things I wanted to clarify. I wasn't interested in joining the Church of Satan. I didn't want to be a part of it. I didn't want to be part of any group. And I was not part of any group. Um, I'm allergic to groups, but I'll get into the mistake of joining the Temple of Set, which was a complete idiotic error on my part. So he didn't show up at Forey's birthday, but Kenneth Anger was there at Forey's birthday, and he came up to me and my drummer, Evil Wilhelm, and we began speaking a bit, and I even talked to him. He knew about Radio Werewolf, and he after he met us, he looked into us a bit more, and he sent Anton newspaper clippings and interviews and ads about us, saying, "Look at this, weird local band, Radio Werewolf." So when I moved to San Francisco, uh, then I did finally meet Anton, because he had gotten to know Vale of this magazine Research. I don't know if you remember that, but it was like a hip industrial music alternative magazine book that came out. And this guy Vale had met Anton at a bookstore. That is what brought Anton back into the hip, groovy world of underground music. He was a forgotten figure at that point. But because of Vale and Research, Anton became like meeting younger musicians and that kind of thing.
Mm.
So Anton had heard that when I moved to San Francisco in 1988, that my girlfriend and I, we lived in this beautiful Victorian apartment house, and it was totally decked out with satanic paraphernalia. The whole place was like a ritual chamber. And I had purchased about 2 years earlier from an occult shop in Hollywood a trapezoidal altar from the Church of Satan that had been used in 1966 and
Oh.
67, and I used that as an altar because it had a door, a hidden door on it that you could put ritual paraphernalia in it. My girlfriend would lay on it when we would do rituals. So he heard about that and he wanted to come over. So I said, can we do this interview? And he said, yeah, we can for the book. He agreed. He never went anywhere, so it was very odd for him to leave his
Hmm.
house to come, but he wanted to see this old artifact of his to determine whether it really was.
And when you say your girlfriend, that wasn't Zeena.
No, 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 I
Okay,
didn't
so there
know
was
Zeena.
no connection. Okay.
I no,
Wow.
I didn't. No, I didn't know Zeena at all yet.
Yeah.
No, no. Um, so yeah, so he came over to our apartment and we showed him this trapezoidal altar, and he looked at it. He said, "Yeah, this is." I remember the name of the guy who was a carpenter who Anton knew, who made the altar for him. His name was Chuck Huntley. I later found out from Zeena, this guy was a notorious child molester who went after little girls. That's the kind of people that Anton knew, and we'll get into that too. There's a serious aspect of that which we will get into. So he said, yeah. So we had a pleasant conversation, and then the only two things I wanted to, we're sitting there in a black and red satanic ritual chamber talking to Anton. My girlfriend served tea and cookies for him. He brought his then partner, secretary Blanche Barton, with him, who accompanied him everywhere. And I only wanted to interview him about two things from this chapter. I've mentioned this before in other interviews. At that time, it wasn't really known the details that Susan Atkins, one of the women who were involved with the Tate LaBianca murders, was involved with Anton. He tried to cover that up in all through the 70s because the Manson murders pretty much put an end to the Church of Satan very quickly because of the wrong-headed association with Satanism, which it didn't really have.
Right.
And because his own stupid thing of lying and saying he was involved with Rosemary's Baby backfired and connected him to it. And people thought, well, these murders must be satanic, and Polanski made that movie, so it's got to be with Satanism. So
Hmm.
that was like shit on his shoe. The Manson murders really made the kind of fun, cutesy pie, harmless reputation of the Church of Satan before that. Then people thought, oh, these are murderers,
Mm.
So I wanted to interview him, like, how well did you really know Susan Atkins? How did you? And he very kindly and helpfully got me photographs of her that had never been seen before from nudie magazines of her. Now they've been seen everywhere. I put it in my film, Charles Manson Superstar.
Hmm.
Now it's been everywhere, but it showed Susan Atkins. She took acid and she played a vampire. She was a stripper. He hired her from some strip club to do this topless witches review. That was something that Anton put on at a strip show in North Beach, which is an area where there were a lot of strip shows and adult entertainment and live sex acts and that kind of thing.
Mm.
So we talked about that. He confirmed that he knew her. He didn't really, before that, he didn't, but she wrote about it in her ghost written autobiography, and that outed the fact that she knew him. He didn't want to have any association with Manson. He hated Manson, in fact. And so I came in as a friend of Charlie, and that was a bit, out of his experience.
Hmm.
So I interviewed him about that. And then the other thing I wanted to interview him about was his claim in the Satanic rituals that he had gone to Germany in Berlin in 1945, that he had come here in right at the end of the war, which he would have been 15 years old. I know a lot about military history. I come from a military family, a World War II veteran. I know and knew that is so unlikely as to be nearly impossible.
Mm.
Nobody, a 15-year-old kid from America was not going to occupied Berlin immediately after its occupation
That's
by the
crazy.
Soviet.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he said he saw uh, like lost, hidden satanic films that were made in the 20s that inspired the supposed satanic roots of Nazism, which is also nonsense. That's complete bullshit. But I didn't know the extent of his mendacity at that point. I didn't trust him exactly,
Right.
but I didn't think he was just making up sheer bullshit. So I said, well, I know everything about German cinema of the 20s. I don't know, what films are you talking about? And he was very vague. He said, this is supposed to have, imagine how impressive it would have been. A 15-year-old kid in post-war Germany in the ruins of Germany, you'd remember. And he said, I don't really remember the names. Ask Ken Anger. Ken Anger would know. And I thought, my girlfriend and I looked at each other like, that's weird. You don't remember this thing that influenced you to look into the, if people know the satanic rituals, this is where he claimed the elektrische Vorspiele, which is a satanic ritual
Mhm.
that he claimed was connected to National Socialism, which is totally bogus. There was no satanic connection to National Socialism. On the contrary, the Hitler regime persecuted occultists of every kind, but I
Didn't
didn't know.
Aquino write most of those rituals?
I'll explain that. I'll explain
Okay.
that. And that's a good question. Remind me to get back to that. Don't be as sloppy as you were in the last interview. Remember your
I have learned.
questions. Okay. Um, so, okay, this is the roots of this elektrische Vorspiele. And that's how he said, I don't know. Ask Ken Anger. Maybe he would know. I don't remember. So that was a bit disappointing. And then I said, well, I'm trying to get something to put in the book. And what do you remember of Berlin in 1945? And again, I'm a military history buff. I know everything about World War II, so this is the wrong person to lie to. He said, well, and this is such a bad lie, and this is the way he was. All I remember were there were burnt out Volkswagens everywhere. Well, I happen to know that the Volkswagen was designed by Hitler to be the people's car. Everyone in Germany would have gotten, like they gave everyone a radio, everyone would have gotten a car. But when the war started, Volkswagen, this company that Hitler founded, the people's car is what it means, became devoted merely to making military vehicles. The classic Volkswagen was never manufactured until the 50s after the war. So it didn't, that's well known. Anyone who knows anything about the history of Third Reich would know they never, this was one of the promises he made. You're going to get, you saw a prototype of it, but the classic Beetle, which is what he was saying were everywhere, they never made them. Volkswagen was making tanks and military vehicles for the war. They would never. So then again, and this happened a lot, me and my girlfriend looked at each other like, okay. And at first I just thought, well, I didn't immediately have a terrible feeling. I just thought, okay, he's a fabulist and an
Mhm.
exaggerator, and
A
all
little bit
right,
here,
maybe
there.
yeah. I didn't have a bad impression. He was open and he answered a few other questions. We got along personally, but what we got along on was, we were interested in the same things, but not the occult. We didn't agree spiritually.
Musically.
Um, yeah, musically, about culture, about silent movies. My girlfriend at the time was a stripper at the Mitchell Brothers, which was down the street, this famous strip club, and he was fascinated with the history of strippers and all of that. So that kind of thing we had in common. But that was a secular friendship. It wasn't
Mhm.
based on, and I had an organ there, so he played it, and I would go to his place and play the keyboards he had, and we talked about music a lot. So then he invited me over, well, to keep interviewing him about all of these myths and rumors, which at that time, remember, nobody had written there had been one biography of him in the 60s or 1970, but nobody really knew. There were just rumors. So we would go over to his house in the middle of the night, and I'd interview him for hours about everything. And in good faith, I didn't come in cynically thinking this
Right.
guy is a psychopathic liar.
We're gonna
In
prove
fact,
him.
I thought he's a little bit pathetic, and I would like to prove maybe something he's saying is true because people doubted it. So one night we watched Rosemary's Baby on his video player, and I said, "Show me where you are." Because my girlfriend and I had watched it at a movie theater, and we looked at that sequence. There's nothing that could possibly be him. And he was very weird and defensive and vague about it. Like, if you can't see it, he was just hedging his bets and being evasive. We sat right there and said, and then I found out I mean, the producer of Rosemary's Baby, Gene Gutowski, told me laughingly, no, Roman didn't believe in occultism. We didn't hire a technical advisor. I sat there with Roman as we went through the book by Ira Levin and adapted it every page to the screen.
Hmm.
Didn't care about occultism. We didn't, it's a movie. It was a movie.
Right.
We didn't, and I further found out there was an actor named Clay Tanner, a cowboy actor, played the devil. He's in the contracts from Paramount, and a female dancer, a very skinny female dancer, played the devil in this very thin reptilian suit that you see for a moment. So
Oh, it was a female
yeah,
dancer.
so
Okay.
there's absolutely, it's proven he had nothing to do with it, and yet he kept, pretending that he was involved with Rosemary's Baby. Even some of his obituaries, and actually this is the opportunity to point this out. Zeena and I wrote this document called Anton LaVey, I think, in February of '97,
Hmm.
shortly after he died. We didn't write that to bother Church of Satan people it was because so many journalists were contacting Zeena at that time for comment for his obituary, and they had all kinds of wrong information that he was in church, that he was in Rosemary's Baby, that he dated Marilyn Monroe. They believed all his lies. So she put together with me this sheet for journalists, and someone leaked it to the public. We didn't intend that to be anything but a corrective to journalists who were contacting her, so she didn't have to explain the whole damn thing to everyone who called her. So
They leaked it. The journalists. Mm.
somebody leaked it, and it got online, and then people thought we did it to antagonize Church of
Right.
Satan people, but we didn't. It was just to
Mm.
just the phone was ringing constantly from journalists. Can you make a comment about this or that? And so that was just an expedient way of dealing with it. So anyway, the longer I would go over to Anton's house to interview him, every interview, okay, you were a police photographer. Show me the police photographs that you took. You became a Satanist because you saw the dark side of human nature and you saw these violent murders, and show me that. Well, he didn't have them. He showed me some amateur photographs he'd taken in the 40s, but they weren't police photographs. He wasn't, okay, you were the city organist. Is there pictures of you as that? No. Um, ultimately, or then I would ask him innocent questions like the Black Flame, the name. Oh no, the cloven hoof? I'm sorry, I'm
Mm.
confusing my important satanic
Right.
terminology. The cloven hoof was the name of his newsletter, and I'm an aficionado of Weird Tales, which was a 1930s horror magazine that
Absolutely.
Lovecraft, and Robert E. Howard, and Clark
Yep.
Ashton Smith, and all of these people worked for. And I had read a Robert E. Howard story about Satanism from the 30s, and that's when Anton was a kid. He read Weird Tales when it was, on the stands. He was very influenced by it. In fact, a lot of the Elektrische Vorspiel is stolen from a story from Weird Tales by Frank Belknap Long, called The Hounds of Tyndalos. If you read it, you will see he actually just stole the ideas directly.
Oh,
And there are other things in the satanic rituals. Another ritual is stolen from H.G. Wells' Island of Dr. Moreau. If like
for
me, you
sure.
are a connoisseur, a reader of horror literature, you would see this guy just basically took,
Well,
you know,
I'll jump in and redeem myself with the Aquino in the rituals. So, what was that about? I thought that Aquino wrote several of those rituals.
he wrote the Lovecraftian one, which is typical. He wrote, I forget
Ah,
what it's called. They were both obsessed with Lovecraft. The interesting thing when Zeena and I, and this was a drama, like a showdown in a cowboy movie, after Anton died, and Zeena is the heiress or one of the heiresses to his estate, we were allowed to go back to the Black House after we had totally renounced him and become the arch enemy of the Church of Satan. They had to open the door and let us in, Blanche and other, and you cannot even imagine the tension and hatred that was like the house was vibrating with it,
oh
and
my.
we were, and she was going there to review the estate to see, and I'll get into that a bit too later because it is important. Um, but one thing we found, because when, like I say, when you went out of the purple room, which was like a living room where he greeted his guests, and the kitchen, which was where he would play the keyboard, the rest of his house was literally looked like some crazy old lady's hoarding facility. It was just piles and piles of like an archaeological dig where this layer's from 1973, here's 74, literally receipts, clothing, whatever books he got or records from that, they were just all there, in so we would get down deep, 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 and we found as a probably a teenager, he had made a page that said the Necronomicon by, I so he was going to make, obviously had the idea for some sort of satanic Bible-ish thing, but he was going to do what this other hoax manipulator did later. Peter Lavenda put out this fake Necronomicon, which I'm sure you've seen, this paperback that idiots think is the real Necronomicon. Have you ever seen that
Is that Simon's
paperback?
Necronomicon, they call it?
Yeah, Simon.
Yeah, yeah.
Simon is what Peter Lavenda. So this
Oh,
must have been in the 50s. We found this old piece of paper, like he made a dummy of what the Necronomicon by Anton LaVey or something like. I don't remember exactly. And we wondered if his obsession with Howard Lovecraft, HP, was
hmm.
because he was Howard. That's the kind of personal thing. He too was Howard. So I wonder if his obsession with Lovecraft
Made a connection.
was like, this is a message to me in this kind of schizoaffective symbolism way that he thought. So Aquino shared this obsession with Lovecraft. Also, as I saw with Kenneth Grant in the Typhonian OTO in England, and to me, that's complete nonsense. A fictional character has no magical power. That I totally disagree with. That's kind of a chaos magic
Hmm.
idea that you could use anything. You could use Mickey Mouse or Superman, and it would be just as good as Zeus or Apollo. Well, I totally disagree with that. But they basically had this postmodern idea. Well, since
Mm.
supernatural beings don't really exist, you can use Cthulhu or Lovecraft's fictional monsters. So, as an exercise, Aquino, when he was a priest in the Church of Satan, wrote this Lovecraftian rite um, and that shows you how important he was. That Anton would let him actually include a chapter in his
Absolutely.
book. Yeah. So
And
anyway,
no, go
to
ahead.
make a very long story short, which I will explain much more in my memoir about this, in good faith, okay, let's talk about police photographs. Nothing. Rosemary's Baby. Nothing. Where did you work at the carnival? What carnival? He didn't work in any fucking carnival. He loved carnivals. He loved the novel Nightmare Alley about a carnival con man, which was
Mm.
like, that was his real, if you read Nightmare Alley, that was his real inspiration. And that guy, by the way, his middle name was Stanton, Howard Stanton. And the character in Nightmare Alley is named Stanton. So again, I think he just read
Whoa.
fiction and
Hmm.
thought, "Oh, that's me." And the character Stanton in Nightmare Alley comes from a freak show, and he becomes a phony medium. He gets a house and paints it and makes it into this haunted spook house, which is exactly what Anton did with his parents' house. That's another thing, the Black House. He claimed it was a Victorian mansion that was owned by Mammy Pleasant, a famous and notorious brothel keeper, a madam
Mhm.
in the Barbary Coast. It was his parents' suburban house.
Can I
It
ask
was an,
something like, just being a kid from Michigan, if my
yeah,
dad gave me a house and then I'm having satanic baptisms and a bunch of weirdos around my granddaughters, I'd be like, get
right.
your ass out of my house. Like, did they know he was kind of mentally ill, or
Oh,
what was with
I
them, the
think, yes.
grandparents?
Yeah, okay. Well, that's a good question. I think he was a very troubled child. I know from personal conversations I had with him because we got to know each other pretty well. He was, I think, I mean, now you would, oh, no, is it fading a bit?
It's okay now. It just snapped back.
Is it,
Sorry.
oh, yeah, these days he would be called neurodivergent for sure. And he was bullied and lonely as a kid. And I think, yes, his parents certainly understood there was something a bit touched about him. And basically, all he ever, forget all the legend about him. The only thing he ever did, he was a lounge organist. He was a very competent musician.
Hmm.
I'm not doubting that. He definitely was a very good, competent organ player. Absolutely. And that's what he should have remained. But he was an organist at a lounge called the Lost Weekend. And his parents moved out further into another part of San Francisco, into the suburbs. So they gave him their house, and he turned it into the house that's in Nightmare Alley. He painted it black. He added secret chambers, like a cheap carnival.
Hmm.
That's what it was like. It was like going into the spook house
Yeah.
at the carnival. But if you turn the lights on a little too bright, it's kind of shabby. It's kind of falling apart. It's okay to look at for 5 minutes in the dark, but don't look too closely.
Kind of a reflection of
So
him himself.
very much, yeah. I mean, it was just a facade.
You had mentioned, what's you had mentioned that you had gone into the Black House again, and I think in a while ago, you had mentioned something about a card or something in LaVey's taped or something to
Oh,
LaVey's.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. So when we went to the Black House the final time to clear out and by the way, it was like the House of Usher. Not only was there hoarding everywhere, like just this unbelievable mess of just stuff left where it was, in 1978, it just still sitting there. Um, Everybody who was there, two hostile teams, people who liked LaVey, and then me and Zeena and our friends who didn't. Imagine the tension of that. And he had, and the death was not that long before. So it was incredibly. I actually went to the altar in the ritual chamber, removed the Baphomet that had been there forever, like a round Baphomet over, and in front of the others, I snapped it in half over the ritual chamber, the altar of the Church of Satan. So
Oh,
imagine the tension of that.
what did they do? I mean,
They
that
couldn't do anything. They couldn't do a thing.
they couldn't do it. So that was
No.
part of her property,
Yeah,
Zena's.
yeah. It was like, here's what you can take. Here's what Carla can take. Here's what Blanche had already taken everything that she could, and yeah. So I mean, we were arrogant and hostile about what we did. Zeena asked immediately upon coming in to Blanche, "Can we get uh, a third of the ashes. And Blanche was not going to do that because she knew what we would do with it.
That would end up in a
Like,
curse jar for
like
sure.
a friend of ours, when we were, well, yeah, to explain our attitude when, and again, you have to remember, I think I need to make this clear before I even say this stuff.
Yeah.
Idiots in the Church of Satan believe that Zeena quit because she wanted to take over the Church of Satan, and Anton wouldn't let her. And so, no, she was, when I met her in May of 1988 and we first began dating, she was already sick of his lying and bullshit. As I got to know her, she was already tired of being the high priestess of, and going out, I mean, for instance, going out and saying the nonsense he told her about his life, and then finding out, no, like, for instance, a lot of the Satanic Bible is plagiarism stolen from Ragnar Redbeard's Might is Right. He didn't know Jane Mansfield as well. He didn't date Marilyn Monroe. And these are the things that would be bringing up. And she is an ethical, honest person, unlike her father, and she was not going to keep perpetuating these lies. And so she was struggling with that even when I met her. She wanted to go on with her life. She did not want to spend there. And the idea that we together conspired to take over the Church of Satan, which there was nothing to take over. It was a pathetic guy in his house, making $50 a pop when someone was stupid enough to buy a red membership card. There was nothing. Nobody would want to take it over. It wasn't like this vast secret society. We wanted nothing to do with it. We were sick, and she was sick of him before I was. It got so bad between them. There was a point where I had to be the middleman. She would not speak to him. So I would call him to relay a message from her. Here's what Zeena says. And he would tell me what he had. That she would not speak to him for the last months of their, and she said, I'm gonna quit on this date. I'm sick of this. And then what happened is he actually managed to threaten her life by sending a stalker our way that he knew was a dangerous stalker. And that was when she just said, okay, I'm not going to quit politely. She was just going to like fade away. Like, okay, I'm done with the high priestess and you find someone else. So then she split with him hostilely. So people need to understand, we had no interest in anything to do with the Church of Satan, let alone taking over something that was nothing to take over. It was a little mom and pop business that sold membership cards.
And
It's
this
not this fast.
pattern of murderous intent, ridiculous or not, through music or whatever, but
Yeah,
the skinhead toward Aquino, and now this stalker against Zeena.
right.
There is,
And to his wife, or common law wife, Diane, who he
yeah,
beat off. He beat her all the time. He beat her bloody. Zeena grew up in an atmosphere of domestic abuse constantly and having to conceal and hide what was really going on. Uh, the turning point in their partnership, Diane and Anton was literally strangling her, and the police had to come, and Carla, Zeena's sister, saved Diane from Anton. He was a violent, abusive. Anyone who supports this piece of shit, then you support the abuse of women. You support the beating of women. And again, I mentioned this in the last interview, the main financial support for the Church of Satan and for Anton from the beginning until the end, when he was bankrupted by Diane's palimony suit. He basically became bankrupt, the great master magician. Donald Werby, this mafia-connected child molester, very wealthy Democrat donor, hotelier in San Francisco, who was arrested and tried for child molestation, was Anton's main supporter. Furthermore, this guy, Donald Werby, had sexually molested Stanton, Anton's grandson, at a New Year's party in front of other people. People saw it happen, And Anton refused to press charges. Zeena was very young, because she had him when she was 13. So he refused to press charges because Donald Werby was his whole financial support. He depended on him. So if you support this piece of shit, understand you are supporting domestic abuse of women and child abuse. Not in a satanic way, not like what idiot evangelical Christians, just sleazy, disgusting people. That's what it's about. That's what's behind it. And so if you don't understand that context, you don't understand our hostility and why we would want nothing to do with it at all. So
Absolutely.
what you're talking about, the card that you mentioned,
Oh, yes.
when we went systematically through these piles of archaeological dig of the guy's whole existence, and by the way, everybody who was there got sick afterwards because there was a smell. There was this foul, toxic smell of things that have never been touched in decades. Everyone got sick from some kind of infection, all of us, for a while. I can smell it right now. It was Lovecraftian in the true sense of the word, rotting and foul. And in his bedroom, which the last room we went into, which he made his bedroom seem like a shabby hotel, which he loved shabby hotel rooms. So he made his bedroom look like a cheap hotel room. And right near the bed, right, like a table right near his bed, there were a ton of psychiatric medicines for depression, anxiety, like, this many in the bottles right there where he was. And, why is that somebody you think has any kind of wisdom or is some kind of heroic genius? This was a person who was filled with anxiety and depression. I mean, it's not his fault, but he was a weak person. He was someone who didn't have the capacity to deal with life. He was reliant on psychiatric medicine to get through the day, at least at the end of his life. And he was a very anxious, frightened person. So right above where all these medicine bottles were for anxiety, for depression, etc., he had pasted a card on the wall with tape on it and written in his handwriting, and it basically a very primitive statement, kind of like what an old Catholic lady might have, like, any negative forces, or I wish I kept it or took a picture. Any negative forces or anything that's harming me are dispelled by, it just showed he was frightened, that, and that's very primitive magic. This is supposed to
Mm.
be some great sorcerer with secret information and privy to the secrets of the ages, and that was the extent. But it just showed anxiety pills and this little pathetic card to,
They protect me
even though
from negative
right, not even
vibes.
specifically. I mean, a real magician would address a being who would be capable of doing that. And that was the thing. He was very vague about magic. Who was he appealing to? He didn't believe in the devil. He didn't believe in Satan, which again, that's another fantasy of Aquino. I'm sure that in Anton's con man way, when Aquino was around, he would humor him about believing literally, but probably not
Mhm.
coming out and saying so in a Trumpian, vague, evasive way, not really stating. I'm sure he flattered and appealed to Aquino without denying it. But this is what con men do. They tell you what you want to hear privately to keep you on their side. So yeah, it's important too to understand what one thing that Aquino claimed, that the Church of Satan always was not atheistic, that it did really believe in a literal devil. It's just not true. Not true at all. So anyway, I think that tells you a lot. If that's the kind of magic that he was doing, killing people he knew, warding off negative forces. This is a very low level. This is
Mm.
not even a competent magician. So
It's just, yeah, if you're in the occult or you were attracted to this in the 80s, I mean, he was kind of like a hero to a lot of us, especially in the Midwest. I mean, we're not in California. I
Right.
mean, I remember seeing Aquino for the first time. I could barely comprehend that he could exist as a person. You know,
Yeah.
it's so alien. Um,
Right.
and so part of this, these interviews, I hope help people that, you know, maybe even during that time you were a bit of an outcast or whatever, and you identified with these people, and it seems like there's a power or empowering. And
Mhm.
the truth is, all this fraud, and it's looking more and more, to be honest, just like complete fucking mental illness.
Yeah, it is. I say that all the time. I remember telling a German journalist, there's nothing about occultism to tell you about the Church of Satan. This is psychopathology. This is, what folia do is when somebody's similarly crazy as you, they become attracted to you and you live in your own little world of madness. He attracted people. I mean, he would take his symptoms of mental illness and justify them with satanic uh, wrapping, or icing.
Mhm.
Like he was depressed, so he slept all day. He didn't do anything all day. He didn't do anything. He was not a productive person. As a writer, as somebody who writes, actually, I could see, if I don't have time to hang around people talking for hours, I got stuff to do. And I thought, when does he write? And I saw he'd wake up at 6 p.m. and sit up all night talking endlessly to me and my girlfriend or whoever was visiting him in this purple room, just ranting and raving endlessly all night till we'd be falling asleep at like dawn. Um, sometimes it was interesting, sometimes it was rambling nonsense, but he
Like when you
didn't do
visit an
anything.
old person, you know, your old aunt or grandma, and
Yeah,
the stories repeat like 20 times.
right. Exactly like that. Yes, yes. And I'd have to politely say, yeah, yeah, you told me that story. Yes. And, you
Mhm.
know, um, he was also, and I'm not saying yes, he was a harmful person because he was a violent, and he didn't fight with men. He was a weakling. He beat
Mhm.
women.
Yeah.
It's like I could hear some idiots think he was a quote alpha male. Well, he wasn't. There's nothing weaker and more disgusting than beating women. And furthermore, the genuine and real left-hand path that only has meaning in the tantric context is veneration of women, the true left-hand path. So,
Literally the
not that he
female
never.
side.
Right,
Literal.
right. So, yeah, he was extremely misogynistic, and if you're okay with child molesting and wife beating, and also the satanic witch courses he gave in the 70s based on his book The Satanic Witch,
Hmm.
he was a low level pimp. These women would come to him to learn how to be a satanic witch. He would teach them how to be a prostitute and send them out there and get money from them. They would bring money to him. He was, a low level pimp. That's what these satanic witch students were doing. And he
And
beat some of them too,
and he
you know.
taught the best way for a woman to be empowered is through a male
Right, right. And don't,
in that book.
don't fuck them though. Just lead them on, get
Yeah.
money from them. Don't put out, you know. So a semi pimp. I mean, real pimps
Hmm.
actually sell. But however, like to Sammy Davis Jr. was obsessed. He was a sex maniac who wanted as many white women as he could get, and the friendship, such as it was between them, not entirely, but was largely based on the fact that Anton would provide women for Sammy Davis when he was in San Francisco. That they didn't have it, they weren't sitting around talking about satanic theology. That
That's amazing.
and when I lived in San Francisco, I would meet people who'd been part of the Church of Satan when it was an active thing where people came to the house. And you have to understand, in 1970, after the Manson murders, the house closed. There were no more public rituals. There were no more anything. That was the end of
It
it.
wasn't cute anymore.
No, no, it became dangerous, and it was dangerous for Zeena growing up. People would follow her home with an axe. They knew she lived there. People knew this is where these Satanists live. So it was dangerous. Yeah. So, I mean, I hope you get a more realistic idea of it. And I understand fully that if people are emotionally committed to their hero and it meant something to them in their youth or in their romantic idealism, it's very hard to
Hmm.
see the reality of something. I see the same thing with Aleister Crowley. I look at the pathetic nature of his shabby life as a junkie narcissist, asking people to buy him things, and think, why does anyone think this is an impressive person? I will never know, I see them as similar. Austin Osman Spare, great artist, but what a complete pathetic fuck up of a person.
Well,
I mean, I think if you're a magician, you should be a competent
hmm,
human being. You should be able to master the human animal plane at least,
hmm.
I think as a basic criteria.
Well, you've become a Buddhist and a teacher of Buddhism. One of the teachings suggests that we should see our enemies as teachers. What has Anton Xander LaVey taught you?
Well, yes, I don't regret the experience, and we didn't really emphasize Aquino that much in this, but
Hmm,
Aquino too. They 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 showed me the complete shallowness and meaninglessness of these self-invented occult organizations that I was, well, growing up, I resisted joining any group until 1988. I had never had any interest in joining any kind of satanic group whatsoever. I thought they were a bunch of clowns. And, I met organized, and I'll get into this in my memoir. There are, and there were other somewhat organized groups of real Satanists who, real in the sense that they believed in the devil. They were mostly in Catholic countries. In Mexico, I
hmm,
encountered a satanic group that was probably like the basis of some of the narcotic syndicates today in the early 80s. But there were celebrities and wealthy Mexicans who were like inverted Catholic Satanists. And real Satanism, I don't know if it still does, but at that
hmm.
time I did encounter in Italy, in France, um, and in Mexico and South America, there were real satanic groups that literally worshipped what they believed to be the devil. I
Right.
don't think the devil is what they thought it was anymore, but there were, and Anton actually met some of those people in Mexico when he was involved with this film, The Devil's Reign. I don't know a
Hmm.
lot about what happened, but I know he did have some encounter with this genuine Latin American Satanism, which a lot of it is connected to criminality
Hmm.
because they believe they take the Catholic Church and invert it and think we should do evil. That's what the devil wants us to do. A lot of it's involved in narcotics trafficking and
Hmm. And that kind of connects to the Richard Ramirez, who possibly also met Anton LaVey.
yeah, he said Anton recalled that he did open the door one day and see Ramirez out there, who talked to him politely. And when we asked Richard in jail, when we visited him, he said, honestly, I was so fucked up on drugs, I don't remember.
He might have. Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, and he said he was on every kind of street drug that he could find at that point. He was out of his mind on drugs then. But I mean, it's very likely, it's possible.
Yeah. Hmm. Well,
But he
this
now,
is yeah.
now Richard too, who I got to know him to interview him for the book. You know, he admired Zeena. He had seen her on talk shows, and he
Hmm.
knew who I was from seeing our media appearances. But he too was a genuine devil worshiper. He didn't believe in the atheistic concepts of LaVeyism.
And even today, like I've had issues with this become a living God. They're
Hmm.
not atheistic. They kind of twist the Goetia
Right.
into their thing. Is there any real influence of the Church of Satan now? It just seems like a LaVey fan club and fashion, quote unquote. And the real, like anything active seems to be either that super political, what is it, the Satanic Temple,
Well,
and
yeah,
these borderline criminal theistic
right.
groups.
Well, yes, the Order of the Nine Angles, I think is what you're referring to,
Right.
that encourages children to kill themselves and encourages teenagers to cut their wrists or kill their animals, or like take this idiotic idea that the devil wants you to be evil and therefore transgression for its own sake. That's on one level of absolute idiocy. And then you got the atheistic. I mean, at this point, it's people dressing in black, and also who is evangelical Christianity, except for a lunatic fringe, is it something that you need to rebel against? It is largely, it doesn't have any power in the world except, obviously evangelical Christians that are trying to impose a theocracy in the United States. But does the average person care if you blaspheme Jesus? I don't think so. I mean, most people don't believe in anything. So, I mean, that's another thing that
Mm.
the Church of Satan claims to destroy every sacred cow, but not Anton. Don't you dare uh, look at
Hmm.
your own sacred cows. Well, that's true of every organization.
Well, but in Buddhism, they say if you meet Buddha on the road, kill him.
Right, right. Well, that
So,
means don't hang on to any
right,
conceptual thinking. And even the Buddha himself taught
is a concept.
that the Buddha himself taught that the Buddhism is just a raft to bring you to the other shore. It is a method. You don't want to get obsessed with Buddhism. It's a technique
Hmm.
to lead you somewhere. It has a goal. You could become totally obsessed with the minutia of Buddhist lore without actually becoming liberated. That is something the Buddha himself emphasized. But to get to your point, it's a good point that your enemies are your greatest teachers. Is something when you, well, it is my negative karma, because I'm sure I have extremely negative karma. I'm sure I have been many kinds of horrible people in many past lives. I have no doubt about that. It was my karma to have to meet Anton LaVey and Michael Aquino. And yeah, I learned to reject completely these artificial, self-created ego cults, and for them to be complete anathema. And they drew me to understand that you must find a traditional lineage that is not a personality cult,
Hmm.
that is not, that has proven techniques that have been tested over thousands of years. For instance, when we broke from occultism completely after the Temple of Set, which was the only group I've ever been stupid enough to join, and that confirmed to me that I was right to never have joined any group. And I'm always amazed why people always ask me the first question, if they're looking for esoteric development, like, what group should I join? And I can only reiterate, none. You don't have to join a group to gain wisdom. So yeah, it encouraged me to look into traditional lineages and proven methods and techniques, not half-baked nonsense that somebody invented last Tuesday.
Hmm.
That's the problem with occultism. All these self-acknowledged ipsissimi and the degrees and all of that. So yes, I am grateful for what I learned. I think I'm a better teacher of Buddhism because I have encountered evil in with a lowercase e. I have seen what the darkness is. I have seen what selfishness and narcissism and egomania creates. I know it very well, and I can caution people. And the funny thing is, a lot of people hate Buddhism more than Satanism because you're calling their bluff. Nobody expects anything of you if you're a Satanist, and so they can say, okay, they're horrible people, and I am too. But if you're saying, no, there actually is a purpose to life, you should be an ethical person, karma is real, there are consequences to what we say, to what we do, and to what we think. You know, the very idea of karma offends modern people.
Hmm.
The very idea that you are in charge of your life, that you are responsible for what happens in your life, and that you are writing your next rebirth right now based on what you do, that our life has consequences, that offends modern atheist, secular humanist people in a way that Satanism doesn't. And, you know, again, to wrap it up, sort of, and if you have any other questions, I'm happy to answer them. But the final thing I want to say on a personal level, the kind of QAnon level of the internet that constantly regurgitates ridiculous, grandiose conspiracy theories, they're constantly playing these handful of clips of mine from interviews from 1988 and 89, and they present them as if I was a leading member of the Church of Satan. I was never, ever any such thing, never wanted to be. Anton gave me and Genesis P. Orridge and Marilyn Manson and Boyd Rice and other people of our ilk in that world honorary membership cards, like, you know, and he gave my girlfriend an honorary membership card the first time we visited him at his place. I never was a member of it. I never had any administrative function. There was none. There was none. It was, you know, I'd go with him and Blanche. Sometimes they'd drive to their post box to get the cash that idiots would send to get then a $50 membership card. That was the Church of Satan. So people that think that, you know, and these Christians have totally misinterpreted what I even said in the 80s, which I was representing the werewolf order, not the Church of Satan. But to them, the Church of Satan is this gigantic thing that has its
Cabal.
tentacles in everything. So
Hmm.
so again, I have to express my sense of futility. I know I'm pissing in the wind. Telling people the truth is people don't want to hear the truth. If I've learned one thing, they don't want to know what the devil really is. They're interested in the little soap opera and gossip and personality of human beings. I never was interested in that. So, you know, I say these things because you asked, and I did see that there was a positive reaction to my talking about Aquino and the Temple of Set. But, you know, the internet is a world where people believe what suits their emotions. And you can find any algorithm to suit your reality, which is why we live in such a divisive, hate-filled, insane world right now. There is no critical thinking. So you can say these things till the cows come home, but people will believe what they want to believe, and they will suspect that your motives are not honest or ethical. But you know that. So if you have any questions, I know you had a few others. So I'm happy to answer them.
You've pretty much yeah, addressed all of it, and you know, I I agree that the people in these things, this isn't going to change them. It might even make them worse. But
Oh, will
the
it will
person,
they will only double down.
yeah,
That
um,
was great that Anton never did anything and that he lied about everything. That's amazing. It makes him what a genius. You know, you can't win.
if there's people just getting curious about these things and kind of getting pulled into one of these organizations or even LaVey or whatever, maybe, and they run across this, your words here, it might make them at least pause and have a chance to get out before they waste years of their life.
Right. And it's not just this. It's Scientology. It's
Hmm.
Jehovah's Witness. It's the Mormons. It's not exclusive to the Satanic world. You find it in Christianity. There are fake Buddhist sects that are not
Hmm.
really Buddhist. You know, they're personality cults and pyramid schemes and every kind of con man and corruption. Unfortunately, because spirituality is important. It attracts people who are searchers, and you can be led into a dead end by your own romantic idealism and your wishful thinking. And, you know, hopefully people will understand if I've been there and I've seen it and I'm telling you it's a dead end that is not going to lead to anything positive. then, hopefully someone will believe that.
Well, let's just finish up then here with a message to that person that says, okay, I see you're right. It is a dead end. Where do I go next? Or what should I look for next?
Right. Well, I think the question there is, what are you looking for? I think many people drawn to occultism are content with a kind of fandom, a kind of passive, let's read about the life of Aleister Crowley for the 9 millionth time. And they're fascinated with some nostalgic good old days of the grand, sacred cows of occultism, Parsons, it's just a very repetitive,
And I'm seeing it's like this week will evoke um, uh, Lucifer, and it's like,
right,
oh, and then I spoke to Lucifer and he said that it's like a tribe group thing
right.
that I see is more, yeah, more about belonging as opposed to really searching for yourself.
Well, above searching, here's the thing. Are you looking for the truth? Are you looking for reality? Do you want to know what is true, whether you agree with it or not, whether it appeals to your aesthetic sense? But if you want to wear flamboyant black clothing and have gothic and macabre lifestyle, that's fine. But don't pretend that that has anything to do with this Abrahamic figure, Hasatan, that comes from Middle Eastern, religion. It doesn't have anything to do with it. That's all a bunch of romantic nonsense that comes from literature and horror movies. It's got nothing. There is no real tradition of Satanism. There never has been an organized religion called Satanism. There is no secret invisible college of Satanists. There's no there. It's all fantasy.
I've
And
read a lot of books on Satan and academic books, but I would say your intro to the Satanic Scream is a condensed punch of facts and uh, great writing that sticks with you. And if people are curious as to real history and who the heck what Satan really was or is,
right.
that intro is gold, I have to say.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I wrote it out of a burning firsthand feeling like, well, I mean, I was stupid in my youth as a child, and took the romantic ideas of what Satan was, and through my obsession with it, through my researching it, I rejected it because the deeper I went, the deeper I said, and also not because it's evil, not because think I'm some kind of saint or such a good person. It's because it's not true. And that this is why I emphasize, are you, who am I addressing? Are people who are interested in what is true, not what makes them feel good, not what makes them feel rebellious or
Wouldn't it be
heroic.
awesome if Set was the real foundation of Satan? I mean, yeah, that would be cool. And you could trace this and,
Right,
yeah, and it's isolate, all that stuff would be cool. It's just not backed up by anything.
right. It's
You
just
can't
that's just
follow it.
it's just Aquino fantasizing, and it sounds good, and he's an articulate enough writer, and he uses big words, and he has a scholarly background to make it sound appealing, but it kind of illustrates the problem that the Temple of Set, after rejecting the Church of Satan, but not really, because it was like a Church of Satan fan club, which is one reason that I had to get away from it. They couldn't get rid of Crowley and LaVey and all of the toxic taint of this kind of occultism. They weren't interested in the god Set. They weren't interested in being a temple of Set. It was just regurgitated Satanism. So the thing is, there is no Satanism. There is no lineage, no tradition. There's a bunch of folklore, and
Mhm.
there's Dante's Inferno. There's John Milton's Paradise Lost. There's Faust. There's a bunch of horror movies, and he was obsessed with the Omen movies. Aquino, he identified with the figure of Damien Thorne. This it verges on like fan fiction, like people that write stories about Star Trek. And then he did do that. He wrote
Yes.
these awful Star Wars pastiches that he put himself and people in the Temple of Set in them.
I read them.
So
Yes.
yeah, so yeah,
Um,
so that's the criteria. Do you want to know what's true? I'm sorry, there is no evil monster god who is the opposite of Yahweh. There's no such thing. The Jewish, Christian, and Islamic religion do not say there is any such thing. The figure of Iblis
that's
in,
dualism.
in Islam, barely mentioned, but is there a bit in the New Testament. In no way is this gigantic anti-God, this heroic adversary. It doesn't exist. It isn't. Yes, that would, like you said, it would be cool if you could have this romantic figure of transgression, but read the actual Abrahamic scriptures, you will find it doesn't exist. And not to repeat myself endlessly, but in case no one has heard, yeah, what I wrote in the Satanic Screen in the introduction, go read that, and it says, if you're interested, who and what the devil actually is. Now, he exists. It exists. It's a real thing, but it isn't at all what you think it is. And if you worship it, you are worshiping something that is basically a minor lieutenant of the Abrahamic God. If that's what you want to do, good luck. Yeah, one of the most absurd examples of how empty and easy to disprove the basic foundations of modern satanic lore is, for instance, the figure of Baphomet, which this political activism movement, the Temple of Satan, which is basically just a liberal activist group and not really any kind of serious spiritual organization, and not, again, doesn't even believe in the devil. However, they have popularized the idea in their childish reactionary way of placing Baphomet statues all over America to along with other religious statues to show freedom of religion. So what is Baphomet? Almost, the Church of Satan used it as the name of the official insignia, which that insignia was stolen from a popularly available occult book, just from the cover of a book. It was designed by a German occultist named Oswald Wirth, and then it was on a popular French book about occultism. And Anton just stole that image whole cloth from there. That's typical. But what is Baphomet that even serious occultists ponder, or Christians use, like, oh, this is the real, center of the satanic evil? Actually, most scholars agree that Baphomet is a misheard and misspelled misappropriation of the word Muhammad or Muhammad that the Christian Crusader Knights, including the Knights Templar, heard, particularly the Knights Templar, when they went to the Holy Land and encountered Sufism, and some of the Sufi practices influenced the Knights Templar. They heard the word Muhammad, and that seems to be what scholars agree. So you've got all these Satanists worshiping the Prophet of Islam by another name. I mean, nothing could show you the ridiculous, ahistorical, untrue. I mean, and that just leads to metaphysical confusion. And I know they'll justify and say, well, like the left-hand path might really have meant Tantra once, but now it's become this. Well,
Right.
no, that's still a total distortion of the actual thing. Words and meanings have power in magic. Etymology means something. If you use the word Baphomet and that's referring to the Prophet of Islam, Muhammad, that's probably not what a Satanist wants to be connecting to. And again, talking about Satan, Satan is Jehovah's lieutenant. If you want to believe that it's something else, go ahead and believe it, but that is fiction, fantasy. And I don't think people understand that. What I'm saying is, if you're a Satanist, you are embracing the Abrahamic religion. You aren't breaking with it. You are embracing a very minor figure in it and accepting a bunch of pop culture, folk understandings of this being that has nothing to do with what it is. And I have encountered this being. I have seen it. I know it is real, and I know it is easy to be tricked and fooled to believe it is what you think it is. But so I want to make that very clear. That's what I'm rejecting, is the falseness of it. It's there is nothing there. There is, the Hellfire Club, the Knights Templar, all these things that Satanists use to create some imaginary sense of a lineage. There's nothing to all that.
Well, when you encountered this satanic being, well, Satan, what did you discover that you could share with these people who don't even who
Well,
don't have the ability to
considering
even
how,
meet it?
yeah, I had three different encounters with the physical apparition of this being, which isn't a lot considering that I was a Satanist from my childhood until the 90s. You would think it would be on a daily basis, but there were three. I mean, I feel I was in touch with it a lot, but
Mhm.
actual, as it's said in the magical tradition, to a visible appearance. It is clearly the tempter. It is there to tempt you. It is a being that the demiurge, as the Gnostics refer to Yahweh, sends here to test human beings. When you are making spiritual progress, this being can appear to try to test you, to it does not want you to be evil. It is not trying to lure you into damnation. Also, Satan in no way is connected to hell. There is nothing in the scriptures that connects the devil as the ruler of hell. There is nothing that says that there is a being called Lucifer who had a fight with the angels and rebelled. That is all later embellishment, that people are in love with this story, but it's as meaningful and true as Robin Hood. It's Robin Hood was based on a real thing, but believe me, it's not what you think it is.
And the
So,
Revelations, that was more about symbols of like Rome, wasn't it?
yeah, absolutely. Well, that's an important point, that Christians, I have this argument with Christian conspiracy theorists who think that the book of Revelation is talking about what's going to happen, years from now. Serious biblical scholars, the early Christians were saying the world is going to end then, now, in our lifetime. They weren't talking about thousands of years from now and that Saddam Hussein is the Antichrist and Obama is the Antichrist and whoever the villain of the week is the Antichrist. Napoleon was considered the Antichrist. It was Nero. Biblical scholar, it was referring to Rome and the Roman persecution of the early Christians, and it was talking about the end of the world's going to be any day now. If you really look into biblical scholarship, it's easy to disprove this nonsense. So Satanists who are waiting for the Antichrist, and I've met people like that, that this is not relevant. It's not true. It's not rooted in any kind of tradition.
Well, the demon,
The
I am Legion. Legion, that is a Roman, who was it, 6,000 men or whatever. Um, uh, the land was possessed. So by Rome, all these possessions, I
right.
think a lot of it is hidden political talk, anti-Roman
Well, yeah. I
code.
mean, see, I don't think people get this. I object to Satan because it is Abrahamic. It is part of Christianity and Judaism and Islam. That's why I reject it. Not because I think it is some hugely powerful evil force. And to get back to what you were asking me about my own encounters with it, it presented itself as a tempter, a trickster, like, come with me, I can give you everything. And this, you referred to how as a child I looked to the Bible as a portal to Satanism, because, and I've pointed this out many times, where Christ encounters the Satan in the desert, when he's out in the desert and realizes who and what he is. The devil comes to him to test him, to see on behalf of Yahweh, is
Mhm.
this son of God? So he offers him wisdom, women, power, all these things I will give you if you will bow down to me. He's testing, exactly like Mara in the Buddhist lore comes to the Buddha at the moment of enlightenment and offers him worldly power, beautiful women, all the temptations of samsara. This is a universal religious phenomenon. When you make progress as an initiate, you are tempted. So that is and now if you have your mind filled with all this satanic fantasy, you can project whatever you want on this being appearing. But I can tell you that all the appearances that I've had definitely fit into a trickster, a tempter, trying to test you to see what you're made of. And I failed the test because I did. Oh, yeah, okay, then that sounds good. I want worldly power. I want these things that you're offering. So I failed the test.
You
And then
did fail.
eventually,
Hmm.
yeah, and then eventually I wised up by continuing to do research and critical thinking. I rejected that being because I saw, no, this is not tenable. This is not real.
Hmm.
So it is. I'm not saying that the devil does not exist, but it's just not what you Satanists want it to be, and it's not what you Christians want it to be. He's a low. I've made this comparison many times. Like if Yahweh is the brutal capo di capo, then the devil's his minor thug that goes out to get protection money and make sure that you're loyal to the boss. He's not a powerful figure.
And I think, yeah, it's just research is hard. Critical thinking is hard. Even like I was in a discussion with someone arguing about something, and they kept referring to a text like this name of this demon is in there, and I'm like, I don't think so. It's just not. I mean, he was looking at something published in the last 50 years, as opposed to
Hmm.
500 years ago, and
Right.
with the same title, but these occultists slip things in, and you have to just not believe, um, especially the occult stuff. You have to be so critical. If you're getting fooled by books and humans,
Right.
what are you going to do when you summon a demon? I mean, you're
Oh.
not prepared. You need some
Well,
backing.
and I have summoned the goetic demons, and they are very destructive. They are not here to help human beings, and I've told people don't fuck around with them at all. We don't know what they are. They exist, and they are destructive. And I had this one particular ritual, which I didn't stop being a devil worshiper after it happened, but only me and one other person involved with that ritual are still alive. Everyone else died. Not immediately, but
Mhm.
don't fuck around with the goetic demons. As far as what you said about occultists inserting false material into ancient texts, look at LaVey. He needed to finish a deadline. Avon Books presented him after Rosemary's Baby popularity. Hey, could you put together something that we want to call it the Bible of Satan? He said, let's call it the Satanic Bible. They already had the cover and everything. Can you give us something that we can sell because this is a hot topic to as filler because he was lazy and he had his partner Diane do most of the work really. He took John Dee's Enochian Keys to fill up a good chunk of that book and just satanized it. John
Mhm.
Dee was a devout Christian. He was not a Satanist, and now idiot Satanists think that this very devout Christian was some kind of, prototype devil worshiper.
Enochi in the
But
ultimate satanic language.
right, he could not have been more Christian, John Dee.
Yeah.
Um, so that's a very good example of it. And you've got people doing Enochian rituals that Anton stuck some satanic words in there. But that book is mostly filler. It was
Mm.
filler. Like, how are we going to fill up a book? I don't. They put some of their old newsletters in it. They have a list of the names of satanic beings. They stole a chunk of it from Ragnar Redbeard. It is a very pathetic patchwork quilt work. It's not. Somebody could write a satanic Bible. That's not it. You know. So that's a very good example of this kind of literary invention, like we talked about, like Simon's Necronomicon. There are
Mhm.
people doing rituals with that, thinking that this fraud that was made to sell at the Magical Child bookstore in New York, because the owner, Herman Slater, who I met a few times, said, you know what would really sell? Let's make a real Necronomicon. We'll make it look fancy, and these idiots bought it, and they're still buying it. So yeah, critical thinking is hard. Research is hard. And are you concerned with the truth of the spiritual world, or are you concerned with what makes you feel good, what appeals to your ego? That will be the deciding factor.
Well, just to finally, finish this up, from black capes to red robes, from curses to compassion, your journey is one few could imagine. What's the one truth you've learned that you'd want to leave with anyone still lost in these occult shadows?
There are so many, but I would have to return again to the essential one. Don't take at face value the lore that some occult organization tells you. If it makes you feel good about yourself, it's probably not true. If con men flatter you and praise you and tell you're great, you're joining this incredible group of these are the elite, these are the best people. That's salesmanship. If people are flattering you, that's not real initiation. Real initiation, a true spiritual teacher will tell you your flaws, will show you your blind spots, will not praise you, will not flatter you. They're there out of love and compassion for you to support you, but it's tough love. So to avoid getting sucked into some con man's fantasy, I mean, it's like if you know about narcissism, which is what it is, it's love bombing. You're great. You're wonderful. We are all great. Only we, the secret group of people, know the facts about things. And if you join our group, we'll jerk you off and pat you on the back, and we'll all praise each other and talk about how stupid. I mean, this is the same thing as QAnon. The sheeple, they don't understand, but we know the real secrets. This is salesmanship for lonely people who are looking for some kind of soothing of the emptiness in them. So if you encounter a spiritual tradition that doesn't teach you hard truths that you find difficult to accept, if you agree with it all completely and you don't find anything challenging that troubles you, real awareness of the spiritual world should trouble you. If you see who you really are and what the world really is, you should be unsettled. You should not feel, wow, I'm great. If it doesn't make you have a feeling of humility at the mystery of the universe, then it's not real. So I mean, there are many things I
Mm.
have learned, but that I think is the most important one. Don't trust people's motives. Don't trust people's, if people are flattering you and telling you how wonderful you are, and that's why you should join some group, and then you'll be part of the alien elite if you buy a membership card. Uh, why do you want to be that? And doubt it. Have serious doubts about it. If the religious tradition you're getting involved in is not about truth and self-discovery, but about self-exaltation and ego, then ipso facto it is a dead end.
And you have a brand new book, a limited edition, 300 copies. Um,
Yeah.
and I'll leave a link. So
Well, I
uh,
can talk about that a bit. It's
I'd
because
like you to.
Yeah, because we live in the Kali Yuga, which is the dark age, which is this cyclic period of spiritual desolation. We are in that period now. I saw from my students and from people who write to me every day with spiritual questions, there is need for a non-doctrinaire, non partisan, the laws of initiation. For people, whatever path you want to go on, there are certain laws of the spiritual world, just as there are laws to the physical world, gravity, uh, quantum physics. There are laws to the physical world, and there are laws to the spiritual world. So I have assembled 108 laws, rules for initiates to understand in this fucked up damaged world that we live in because we are living in this apocalyptic time of societal collapse and civilizational decay and social, divisiveness and hatred and tension. There needs to be this is like like emergency broadcast. Look, the house is burning down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Not wasting time with Eastern terminology that you have to learn. Like, what if the ship is sinking, the captain has to say, okay, you go in this direction, you go there, there's the lifeboat. And that's what this book is. It's called, the 108 Laws of Initiation for the Kali Yuga. There's only going to be 333 copies. I know that it will be important, and I know that people will remember what's in it, because these are things that have been tested by my own initiation and dealing with people. So you can order it. You can contact Schreck Works, which my name, Schreck, WORX, works at Gmail, and you can get information of how to order it there. But there are only 333 copies, and it's already been on sale for a while. And when it's done, it will be done. It is in itself a magical act. And I know that these laws will become prevalent because people will see that they work. So it's like boiling down to the essence. What it could be for any spiritual path. What do you need to know, and what do you need to avoid in the emergency circumstances that we're in? The plane is crashing. You don't have time to speculate and ponder. What are you going to do when it crashes? That's the essence of what this book is about.
It sounds like a practical kind of battle manual.
Right. Right. It's like when soldiers are sent to an enemy country, you get a little book saying, here's how you deal with the locals. Here's what the customs are. Here's what you do's and don'ts. Don't ever do that. Do that. It's written in a tone of emergency and urgency, because it is urgent. There isn't much time to find who you are and what the truth is and what consciousness is. That's the nature of the Kali Yuga. So it is informed by my Buddhist teaching, but it's not filled with Buddhist terminology. This is just the raw ingredients of the truth. You can work with them and you will get results.
Well, thanks so much for your time, and I hope that this helps a few people. I hope a lot. I know in my life I wasted a lot of time with my Satans.
Right.
And you've been a beacon, a lantern on that bridge. So, once again, thank you so much for sharing all your insights.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And I want to point out too, I can tell you this because I have made every mistake. I'm not coming from arrogant attitude of I can tell you this because I went the wrong way and learned how wrong it is. So, and a lot of people find it difficult to accept that true understanding means you change your mind when you learn what is true, that you apply the scientific method to spiritual things. If something's not true, you reject it. You don't hang on to it because you have an emotional appeal for it. So I'm coming from the perspective of someone who has seen the deception and the darkness and the lies and rejected it. And I'm encouraging other people to do that too. So anyway, it's a pleasure for me to be here. Thank you for inviting me. And I hope and wish that all your listeners swiftly find the way to liberation. So many blessings to you and to your listeners.
You as well. And if you do come back, no LaVey, no Aquino, I would like to maybe just, if you have just to talk about Buddhism or that.
Oh, there are there's 5,000 other topics we can talk about.
Right.
And there's really no need to beat the dead horse of Aquino and LaVey and all of that.
So as part of my journey, you've
we ritually banish Aquino and LaVey. We give them the license to depart, and we open the way to more positive streams of enlightenment.
Right.
Okay?
The point isn't just to attack them, it's to clear that way and then present something positive. So,
Well, they are victims. You know, I'm not really necessarily attacking them. They are people who were victims of absorbing this extremely negative, toxic, and ultimately untrue spiritual poison. And they suffered because of it. And you should look at their lives and look at their real life, and you'll see, you know, so I have compassion for them. They are in hell. They are in the hell realms, which Buddhism and Hinduism also accept are true. And for the deceit and harm that they've done to people, they are in the hell realm. So we have to have compassion for people who are in torment. And that's a very real danger. You know, that's the route that this will lead you to. It's not a joke.
And you've seen how they both ended, and it was not good. So stay away from that. Thanks
Yeah.
again. Until next
Okay.
time.
My pleasure. All the best.